Well, hello and welcome to In the Growth Space. I am David McGlennon, and I'm really glad that you're here today. You know, today is a very special episode. I get the privilege of having a conversation with a leader that I have followed and had the privilege of really following for a number of years, a guy by the name of Jim Pshock. And so some of you may know my history, or at least a little bit of my history. I was part of a team that helped get Bravo off the ground and get it started and grow over a number of years. And so today I get to actually have a conversation with my good friend, Jim Pshock. He's also the retired CEO of Bravo. He's now on to doing some other consulting work, and you'll hear more about that in this conversation. But, you know, Jim started this company, Bravo, in October of 2008. And if you recall anything about 2008, it wasn't a great time to be starting a company. Most people might even think that it was the worst time to start a company. But I'm here to tell you that when you have a company that provides a solution to a really big challenge, anything is possible. And you're going to hear some of the lessons that Jim learned through all of the twists and turns in the growth of Bravo Wellness. You know, Jim did lead the company through a lot of twists and turns, and he's going to share with us some of his greatest lessons and some of his growth lessons in our conversation today. And you'll notice that Jim is a really humble leader. He's got so much wisdom to share. And honestly, since we know each other so well, we talk a lot about just different growth inflection points in the growth journey of Bravo. And if you're not watching this on YouTube, I would recommend that you go to YouTube and at least check out the YouTube video, because our podcast team is going to insert a picture, a surprise picture. Let's just say it's something that Jim and I talk about and share. It's a little bit embarrassing for me, but hey, I figured it'd be fun to include. So go to the YouTube channel. If you're not a subscriber of the YouTube channel yet, make sure you subscribe and hit the little bell button to make sure that you know about the podcast when we release new episodes. And that just reminds me too, if you're not listening on the YouTube channel, please just hit subscribe here on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to. And make sure that you rate and review as well. We really appreciate that. We want to be able to help more leaders to learn from other leaders and to grow and to develop their own leadership and their life and loving their leadership and loving their growth path as well. Speaking of that, one more thing before we get into today's episode, I just want to encourage you to join us at our Inner Circle Summit. We have our annual Inner Circle Summit coming up on November 30th. And I just want to invite you, our podcast listeners, to that gathering and to the gathering of the community of our Inner Circle members. We're not allowing other people outside of our community to come in unless they have been vetted by one of our Inner Circle members. So it's something we're experimenting with this year. And we want to invite you, since you're listening to the podcast, to join us. You can go to davidmcglennon.com. So it's www.davidmcglennon.com/Inner Circle Summit 2023 for all the details and to get registered. Now, let's get into this conversation today with Jim Pshock. Well, hey, Jim, welcome to In the Growth Space podcast. Man, I am so glad that you're here. And I've been waiting to do this conversation for quite some time.
Thank you, David. It's always a pleasure to connect. And I was honored that you reached out to me.
Man, it's so good. You know, for those of you listening, before we started to hit record, Jim and I were just kind of catching up on family and stuff like that. Jim and I know each other. We go way back. We won't say how far back, but we go a ways back. And
it's 19 years, David. 19 years.
Is it really? Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah, well, I still picture your kids so little.
I know. Yeah, and yours too. And we're talking about grandbabies and everything, man. Oh gosh. Well, because we go so far back, this is going to be a great conversation for sure. As long as Jim doesn't tell too many embarrassing stories about me, but he might. I don't know.
I do have a
But
few photos from costume day.
yes, you do. You know what? I need to have you send me one of those because I was telling somebody about Richard Simmons on some I don't know, sometime I was talking about that and I couldn't find the photo. So if you still have
Oh, I
that one,
think I know where it is.
oh gosh, that's great. Yeah. Okay. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, if we find the photo, we'll plug it in here. I'll ask my podcast team to plug it in here. So that'll be an incentive. If you're only listening to it on the podcast platform, go to the YouTube channel and check out me as Richard Simmons. So you gotta tell the story about like why was I dressed up as Richard Simmons in the first place?
Well, I mean, first of all, my understanding was you didn't have to purchase anything new for this costume. Like you already had
That's
Fallen
true.
Wellness.
I
So
did.
I'm gonna rat you out there a little bit.
I did. Yeah. That's so
But you
funny.
know, the company we worked at together, the company I founded, Bravo Wellness,
Yeah.
by far our busiest time of year was October. We like to do a lot of fun things, and Halloween came and went, and we're like, we don't have any time for a costume party or anything
Yeah.
like that. So we threw one in February, and that it became an annual tradition that every February, when it was kind of our slowest month,
Yeah.
we would have this big costume party, and everybody got so into it. David, you of course were not in the Cleveland office,
Right.
so we invited you to, if you weren't going to be there, to submit your costume remotely, and you were always a great fun participant,
I
starting
loved
with
it.
Richard Simmons.
Yeah.
That's
couldn't
how,
resist.
yeah, I mean, talk about
Oh,
a great culture, right?
yeah.
We had all kinds of superstars like Richard Simmons around at the time.
It's so true. Oh man. Well, we'll get into the culture here in a bit because it was a great culture. And but go back and talk about a little bit about kind of that jumping off point, So you founded a company back in 2008. What a great time to start a company, right? At 2008. For those of you who are around in 2008, 2007, 2009, there was a pretty big real estate crash in that time frame. And so, and economic headwinds for sure. But you decided to start a company, and so I'm kind of curious just about what did that feel like? There's so many entrepreneurs that just there's people who say they want to be an entrepreneur, and they have no idea what that means, and they have no idea what that feels like, especially in the face of an economic downturn. So, what was it like for you?
Free falling, like
Yeah,
really hoping that there's a net down there, and I did the right thing. But there was definitely for me it was a faith journey. You
yeah,
know, physically, mentally, spiritually, feeling like I really something I had really been pushing someone else to do. My boss in this
yeah,
case. I felt like I had a winning business idea, I had a great strategy, I had it all on paper. Hey, why don't you go do this? Why don't you hire me to do this and let me run with it? And I was so confident. And after being rejected numerous times, finally had a friend say, "Why don't you go do it?" Yeah, here I am, a sole provider for a family of six. I have a kid in college, have three kids, ages 12 to 15, in addition to the one in college, and a stay-at-home wife, and credit card debt through the roof. And now with the housing crisis, I had no equity, and I'm like, yes, I should go start a company, right? And
I love it.
you know, the more I put it out there and just started putting it in motion, I received validation of
Mm,
kind of if you build it, we will come.
yeah,
And but I don't have that story of the kid who grew up always wanting to be his own boss. I loved my benefit package, man. I
yeah,
loved my
sure.
401k. I loved to check every 2 weeks. I I was not wired to say I want the risk.
Yeah.
Um, so I think to your question, it was a matter of planning, hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst.
Sure.
And when I talked to my kids individually, and my wife and I, talked and prayed through it, we were really braced for some very hard times. Fortunately, in our case, they didn't last very long.
Yeah.
But taking that step, um, it was terrifying and exhilarating and fun and miserable, like every day.
Yeah. Every day.
And I don't know how
Yeah.
else to describe it, as like you're going to
Yeah.
experience every emotion almost every day.
Almost every day. Yeah, no doubt. Well, man, I tell you that the cool thing is knowing, the ride, because I was on that ride, for a good part of it. And, it was kind of wild because there was so much, you mentioned faith, and there was so much prayer that we did. And I remember when we would get together and kind of plan, we had what we called our push list. I don't know if you remember this or
Oh,
not, but
sure.
yeah, pray
Pray
until
until
something.
something happens.
Exactly, man. And it's amazing, those companies or targets that we had on our list that we were praying after and going after. It's amazing that, a lot of them, came to be clients. Some of them didn't. And it's probably a good thing. I remember at least one or two that were on our list that it's like, whew, glad we didn't get that one, because we would have imploded. But,
Yeah. Yeah,
prayer was such an integral
that was
part.
actually a lesson I remember. That it was, pray until something happens to me meant pray until they sign a contract.
Right, right. Yeah.
One day it was like, no, that's not
No.
what it means. Like them saying no is a good thing. It's them that something happened. You stopped wasting your time
Yeah.
on this opportunity that isn't going to move forward, and now you can put your time and attention on something that has a chance. And
Yeah.
so, like, learning to accept that no is something happening, and
That's
that's a
it.
good
Yeah.
thing, and that's what you've been praying for. That was a big time of, I would say, growing up as a leader for me.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, thinking about your growth journey and the company's growth journey, how would you describe like both of those? I mean, your personal growth journey? I've always heard and have experienced that, you know, a growing company is really all about a growing leader. And so I'm kind of curious about like what was that like for you, just growing as a leader and growing a company at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you would know. It's kind of like when your kids grow up and go to therapy.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sure I have employees who had to go to therapy because they were learning at my expense. I mean, I was learning at their expense, I should say. Um, it was really a matter of um, recognizing, like, I didn't have time, and I wasn't smart enough to not be the same guy at home and at church and in the community as I was at work. And so, it didn't help in that sense that, like, I also hired my kids and my relatives and my neighbors and my friends. And so, like, there's only one guy, there's only one Jim.
Yeah.
And so you can't profess to be a person of integrity and then not be a person of integrity at work. You
All right.
can't talk about time management and prioritizing your family and then neglect your family as an entrepreneur CEO. Um, and so I was constantly under the microscope, if you will, probably more so by myself than others actually,
Mm,
but really trying to make sure that I was walking the talk.
yeah.
And it absolutely forced me to be more disciplined in my personal life and spiritual life if I expected to be disciplined and have my team be disciplined on the business side, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Were there inflection points or parts of that journey that you can like point to and you think, wow, that was really a big moment, or were they just do they just kind of all blend together?
Sometimes you don't know them when you're in them.
Yeah.
But when you look back, first of all, I got to tell you, I mean, I don't mean to come across as if I walked blamelessly for 15 years. Like I stumbled a lot personally, spiritually, professionally, and it's a matter of um, how you react. And one of the things I tried to do was encourage my employees and my close friends to hold me accountable.
Mm.
For example, we have core values up on the wall. Like if you're reading a core value and you see us as an organization or me personally behaving in a way that doesn't align to that, like it's your responsibility to call that out. You don't have to do it like in an all company meeting, but like you
Right.
can come to
Yeah.
me,
Right.
and try to create an atmosphere where it's safe. It's not only safe, but it's encouraged that you do that. And
Yeah.
hopefully it's a simple misunderstanding that we can clear up. But other times,
Right.
I learned I was off track, and appreciated those people willing to speak up.
Yeah.
The inflection points, the biggies were always regulatory in our case.
Yeah.
So we
Sure.
were kind of birthed with the safe harbor to the wellness, to the for wellness and non-discrimination rules under ERISA. Like that's as
Yeah.
boring as it gets. Um, but as we anchored a business strategy in helping organizations comply with complex regulations, we found those regulations just kept changing.
Yeah.
And everything we told you to do last year, you're not allowed to do starting, in January, and we have to re-engineer this entire thing, sometimes at a loss because you weren't paying us to do all this extra work, but the world's changed.
Hmm.
So we had the Affordable Care Act was a major inflection point. The
Yeah.
EEOC coming out of nowhere and suing companies for their wellness program was a major inflection point.
Yeah.
Um, when we finally did secure some outside private equity in 2014, it was a big inflection point.
Yeah.
And then I hire a president. I try to take a smaller role, and delegate things that I had always done haphazardly in many cases. Um, but those are all big inflection points that
Yeah.
change kind of the trajectory, at least for a season.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, just even as you're sharing that, I'm thinking back, I'm flashing back in my mind because I know those inflection points. I remember them, and I think the one thing that came to my mind was, or maybe it was more of a question than anything is, you talked about the inflection point of hiring a president and delegating some stuff. How easy or hard was that for you in terms of like delegation and because I know I work with a number of leaders right now that's a really tough thing. They go from becoming or being the the doer, the integrator in EOS language, to maybe become more of the visionary and letting go of some of that stuff that they used to do all the time is really tough. And I don't know if that was, hard for you or if it came, naturally. I'm just kind of curious about how that delegation went for you during that inflection point.
Um, it's a great question. I remember on one hand feeling like I delegated too much too quickly,
Mm,
because I was so ready to give it up. It was
sure.
not fighting the "don't take it from me." I'm like, hey, this is all
It's like,
yours now.
please, yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah.
I loved being out with customers. I loved
Yeah.
being, at industry seminars and
Yeah.
trying to impact regulations for the future, and running webinars and things like that. Um, Man, I didn't want to deal with HR issues. I didn't want to deal with our finance and accounting and tax planning. I didn't want to deal with our IT scalability concerns and infrastructure. Um, I absolutely respected the need for all of that and wanted to equip it well, but I think I pushed a lot of that too quickly,
Mm,
making assumptions about um, how others would think about it.
mm,
And then
yeah.
you insert yourself back in there know, 9, 12, 15 months down the road going, how do we get here?
Yeah, sure.
And if you're going to do that, I mean, you've got to accept the fact that you're part of the problem
Mm,
and, support that leader, even if they didn't do what you would have done.
sure. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Just to be able to kind of go back and look and support the leader. Um, you know, if you were to do it all over again, Jim, is there something that you might do differently just in terms of like starting a company or, yeah, just in starting the company and then growing it like you did?
I think about that. I have time to think now. Sometimes I
Yeah,
think
you do.
about that too much.
Yeah.
Um, it, I don't know that it's that different from any other part of life where you realize eventually, like the road, the road is why you are who you are, and the failures shaped the person you became. The mistakes became lessons that were turned into opportunities. And so if I didn't make that mistake, would these next four things have happened that caused me to eventually hit this home run? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
that I would want to mess with that.
Right.
I was
Yeah.
thinking back to like the old Twilight Zones with Rod Sterling, when they would go back and change something, and
Yeah.
then you find out like, oh my gosh, I'm not a grandfather.
Yeah.
Like
Mess with that time
like all I
continuum.
did
Yeah.
was change one thing, and
Yeah.
so I'd be afraid to say I would have done much differently.
Yeah.
That said, as I find myself now, coaching my 30-year-old son a bit on running his business and
Yeah.
working with some entrepreneurs and companies that I've invested in, like I absolutely have a ton of lessons learned that I
Yeah.
hope they don't repeat some of those mistakes.
Yeah. No, I love the way you framed that too, because I think that as I think back on just, things that I've messed up and mistakes that I've made in the past, as I think about those become those lessons and those things that I can draw from to be able to, like, coach, mentor, and be able to help others. And would I, was it fun going through them? No, no, not really. But it was worthwhile for sure. And yeah, I think that every entrepreneur probably has those kinds of stories where they think, well, it is what it is, and it made me who I am. And if I can take those situations and learn from it, I don't want to change it because it's who I am today. So,
I
and
mean,
speaking,
certainly it's
yeah,
harder
go
when
ahead.
you think about the economics of some of those things. Like
Yeah,
if
true.
you really believe something would have been a $50 million decision and you didn't make the right one, like that'll eat at you a bit. Like,
Sure, sure. Yeah,
um, but like you truly do have to look for the lesson in there. And I don't know if you remember telling my pony story over the years, but like if you see
yeah,
a giant pile of crap, you can
yeah.
complain about it, or you can start digging looking for the pony that made it,
Look for
right? Like there's a
exactly.
pony in there somewhere. I just encourage you, like if you're dealing with a big pile, start digging,
Find the
looking for that, find the pony.
Find the pony. Yeah, I love that. Oh yeah, yeah, that's so good. There's so many places I could go with that because I was thinking about, I was thinking about the unicorn and oh my gosh, yeah. Oh well, we'll save that for off camera. Good stuff, man. So talk about well, one thing I did want to ask you about, and I'd love for you to share this because it's something that I think you and I have in common, and that is our dads, and I knew your dad. I loved your dad. And Papa Pshock had such a profound influence on the company and the culture. I actually get choked up, thinking about it, but I'm kind of curious, just in your words, what did you learn from your dad, and how did he impact you, in the company that you built and grew?
I mean, I should write a whole book just on that. There's so much. My dad was the most content individual, and I knew him when we had nothing, and he would always set that example of humbling yourself, helping people, expecting nothing in return.
Mm.
Um, he's the guy who'd give you the shirt off of his back. And like those, he wasn't a different person at work either.
Yeah.
And so even if he had to terminate somebody, like he's the first one to try to turn that into a positive and open his network and help them find their next opportunity, recognizing that, this was a season that didn't work out. What did we learn from it? What did you learn from it? How can you turn that into something better?
Mm-hmm.
That's something I took away, and realizing that, I remember being at a point, for example, once where I felt like anytime somebody left the organization, I failed them.
Mm.
They're leaving because I didn't create what it is they thought they were coming here to do.
Mm.
And first of all, I was convicted by God saying, stop trying to do my job. Like,
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, exactly.
you're not their source, I'm their source.
Yeah, yeah.
But I remember my dad telling me, like, it nobody is it's very rare for somebody to come to any organization and work there for 40 years. Like,
Yeah.
I started the company after 3 jobs I had, and I liked all three of them. But you outgrow things. People outgrow organizations. You outgrow the people, and their seasons,
Yeah.
um, of life and seasons of your career. That it's not a failure when there's change.
Right.
It's usually growth when there's change.
Yeah, that's right.
And taking that lesson from my dad helped me immensely.
Mm.
He
Yeah.
he also, David, I'd be remiss if I didn't share, like, we were all very, very competitive. So anybody who was, I'm the
Yes.
youngest of 8,
Yeah.
anybody who was on the Bravo softball team or corporate challenge, I think you were there for some of
Oh
that,
yeah. Oh yeah.
but my dad hated to lose. But
That's why
the
you like
only
the
thing he,
Steelers, man.
oh my gosh, yeah, he was definitely better off being a Steelers fan than a Browns fan for many, many
Yes, he
years.
was.
But
Uh,
the thing he hated more than losing was seeing somebody play as if they didn't care if they won or lost.
mm-hmm.
And so, like, bringing your A game, even if you're outmanned, you're out of your league, like, you better play like you want to win,
Yeah.
and you better lose with grace and dignity, and not throw tantrums.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something I remember from T-ball that I know affected me, as a CEO.
Yeah. I love that. Well, it's so funny because as you were sharing that story, I remember a mug that you had that said expect to win.
I'm looking
And
around because, like, I think it's here.
I was just going to say, I was wondering if
It's
you still
somewhere.
had it. But that I still remember that to this day because that to me, it really spoke to a mindset of going into a situation where you're competing and you expect to win. If I don't win, well, then what am I going to learn from it? And how am I going to win the next time? So I loved that. It was one of those things that, seems silly, but it's like, hey, where's the expect to win mug? I got to get some coffee. Oh,
Yeah, I actually had to take it out of the, the shared cup cabinet because I was afraid it would get broken eventually. But it's
yeah.
like in the museum now of
I love it.
my archives.
Yeah.
So if you remember the store's accessories, that goes back a
Yes.
while.
Oh
That
yeah.
was this
I
accessories mug that I
was it.
believed I bought in the early 90s.
I
Um,
love that.
when Even though I loved my job, I was looking for side hustles regularly to supplement our income.
Yeah.
Um, and I got involved in the Amway business.
Okay. Yeah.
And it wasn't so much the people at Amway with network marketing, but my upline in that business really became my career coaches
Oh,
in introducing me to Zig Ziglar, John
yeah.
Maxwell, Les Brown, Dennis Waitley. I read The Magic of Thinking Big. I read
Oh
Think and
yeah.
Grow Rich. I started reading, The Seven Habits, and things that I had never been exposed to anywhere in my past.
Yeah.
And that whole concept of expecting to win really came out of, that mindset that they brought of saying, prepare to be mocked, prepare to be made fun of, prepare for people to tell you they want you to succeed, but not really support you. Um, and, get a thick skin was a big part of that lesson. But, um, recognizing you have to visualize the win,
Yeah.
and whether that's yourself on a podium in the Olympics, or that being able to pay your house off, like what is it that is going to make you feel like you've achieved what you set out to achieve? Draw a picture of it, cut a picture out of a magazine, stick it on your
Yeah.
refrigerator, like make that the focal point and expect to
Mm.
win. That all came through that Amway experience, quite honestly. And,
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
I didn't know any other way to lead after that, thankfully.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so cool. I think of that and like when you mentioned like Zig Ziglar and John Maxwell and some of those great leaders and great inspirers. I think that all of those help shape us in some way. Is there anybody else that shaped you? Just shaped your leadership journey. I mean, I knew about your dad, but I was just kind of curious if there's anybody else that shaped you.
Many. Yeah. And this is something that I try to be intentional about because of it. So, like, they weren't big authors, speaking in the arenas to 50,000 people. They were usually like a neighbor, a friend, a
Oh
mentor,
yeah,
a boss. Um, and I have an EO, entrepreneur organization forum, that I've been meeting with, once a month for the last several years. And we just had this conversation of like, who were those people, and
yeah,
have you told them?
yeah.
And I actually went out and told some of my former bosses. I remember a
Hmm.
guy named Jim Wiest in probably 1991, 92-ish. I was a young claims supervisor at an insurance company, and I put forth an idea, and he wrote in big blue letters on the proposal, innovation. And this little blurb of just, you are an innovator. I appreciate your willingness to present these innovative thoughts. I accepted that. I like, from
Yeah.
that day forward, I'm like, I'm an innovator. I don't even know how to spell innovator.
That's
But
great.
like, I did I know he didn't know the impact that that little gesture had on me. And I told him, here he is in his 60s now, and he just wrote me the greatest thank you for sharing that.
That's cool.
But I had probably a dozen people like that I could go back and say, here was this moment where they took the time to see something in me I didn't see in myself,
Hmm.
and encourage me. And think about how powerful our words are
Yeah.
when we take the time to do that for others.
Yeah, man. I'm so glad that you said that, Jim, because I just got to tell you, you were that for me. And you know,
Well,
there
why'd
there
you
was a
quit? No, I'm just kidding.
I didn't quit. I didn't quit. I went from strength to strength, man. No, seriously though, you see in people things that they don't see in themselves, and it's really cool to be able to have somebody believe in them. You believed in me at a point in my life when I didn't necessarily believe in myself. And it really made a big difference. I mean, it set me on a trajectory to win. And really, I think that the experience that I had, at Bravo and really building with the team there and growing, helped grow me in a way that I didn't even know it at the time, to be honest. I think some of the things looking back, I see as stepping stones and growth points for myself. And it really helped me to become who I am today. And I just, I have to say, I appreciate that,
Well,
in
thank
you.
you. I'm very
Yeah.
humbled by that.
Nah, I really appreciate it. It's
It was
amazing.
easy to do, David. You got a lot of good things, a lot of good tools to work with, and congratulations on where you're at with your business. Because I'm
Yeah,
not
man.
surprised at your success at all. Uh, you're a born leader and coach, so it's
Yeah,
I'm
thank
glad
you.
to play a role in
Yeah,
shaping
thank you, man. Yeah, it's been a fun ride. It really has. And speaking of ride, I mean, I'd love to hear, what are you up to these days? Obviously, you're retired, quote unquote retired, but you're actually, you know, really funneling your energy into other avenues. And I'd love to hear about the impact that you're having and where you're funneling that energy.
Yeah, thanks. Last month, actually last 2 weeks ago, marked a year since I officially retired.
It's crazy,
Um,
man.
and I'm proud of myself for saying I didn't do a whole lot for a year.
Good for
Um,
you.
I I had been promising, my wife Natalie a sabbatical for a very long time, and
Yeah.
we never did anything longer than like a week here and there. So over this last year, we did a ton of travel. Um, we spent a lot of very intentional time with old friends and family, and we both are fortunate to have our moms with us here locally. So we spent a lot of time with our moms. We became grandparents not too long ago, so we have a 5-year-old granddaughter, a almost 2-year-old granddaughter, and 4-month-old granddaughter. And so we've been just treasuring every moment with them, and now starting to go to different events, their first soccer practice and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just been phenomenal to have the flexibility to do that.
Yeah.
On the business side, I've now started. I did set up an LLC, Praka Business
Yeah.
Consulting, which is Greek for marketplace, by the way.
I love it.
But it's my marketplace ministry
Yeah.
and my way of making myself available to do some consulting and coaching.
Cool.
Primarily, that's been with organizations where we've made some type of an angel investment, and I want to help the CEO founder in those.
Yeah.
Um, also joined the board of a group called Building Hope in the City,
Cool.
which helps about 7,000 refugees a year that are assigned by the federal government to Northeast Ohio.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
find better employment and find transportation, childcare, become official citizens, teach English as a second language. But they have this really cool model where they have several for-profit initiatives that spit off about half of the funding needed for the outreach that they do.
That's
So I'm
cool.
helping on the for-profit side with some of my business experience to help those
Yeah.
flourish, and it's a lot of fun.
I love it, man. That's so great. Well, I am so just excited that you're making a continued impact in the world, and excited to be able to just have a conversation with you here today. It's been a lot of fun to just kind of hear some of your thoughts on leadership, on growth. And for those of you who are listening and watching, one of the things that I talk about all the time is the fact that a company can't grow unless their people are growing. And Jim is one of those people, one of those leaders who really helped his people grow and helped really support them. And I know you helped support me as I came and went out into my own entrepreneurial journey. And you've helped a number of other people as well, and I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful that you really just kind of built into the people that you were around this idea of growth and just continued expansion, because I think it makes the world a better place. It makes business easier and more fun. And I just appreciate you and appreciate your impact in the world.
Well, thank you, David. I think it's partially from my dad, partially just the way I like to operate. But I always um, try to remember that people are people before they're employees,
Yeah,
and we have so much in common just as human beings.
so true.
Um, taking the time as a leader to invite someone to your home, to I
Yeah,
remember hosting poker parties at my house, and
yeah,
the number of people who would say, I can't believe the blend of socioeconomic folks that are here, right? Like
yeah,
the
sure.
the CFO is playing cards with the person delivering the mail and one of our
Yeah.
vendors and my neighbor and an old high school friend. And like, I loved creating those opportunities where you could just be human
Yeah.
and expect nothing in return, and help people in a way just by getting to know more about their family and their situation. And
Mm.
I really just want to encourage your listeners and your leaders, to not overthink this. Like, be kind,
So true,
be
man.
concerned, listen to what they're saying, help
Yeah.
if you can. But
Yeah.
so many people just want to be and deserve to be respected and
Mm.
treated with dignity, regardless of their paycheck or position.
Yeah.
You'll have loyal employee, you'll have loyalty, you'll have friendships, you'll have
True.
people who will go the extra mile just because you cared and you
You cared.
genuinely cared and didn't try to manipulate that. And
Yeah.
that's what I enjoyed the most in every job I've had in the company. And us having such a great relationship after all these years, I think
Yeah.
is evidence of that.
Yeah, yeah, so true. I mean, it's so great to be able to develop, long-standing relationships that, that don't end with a change, and I love that. And I think that the leaders that are listening, man, take Jim's advice. I mean, care about your people, and yeah, maybe go, play poker together, or go hang out together. Just it's so that human element, I think, is so missing. I see it. I see a kind of an uprising now of some leaders who are starting to see that and really begin to change. And I think that's such a great thing. And I think, the more companies with leaders that do that, they'll be the ones that succeed in a rapidly changing environment. So
Keep spreading the word, man. I appreciate what
yeah,
you're doing out there, and thank you for the opportunity to spend a few minutes with your audience.
yeah,
Happy to chat anytime, my friend.
man, thank you so much. Thanks for just sharing a piece of your heart, piece of your journey, and really, really appreciate you being here today, Jim. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man. My best to the family. Take care.